Each branch of the military has their own physical fitness test, and in this video I'm going to break them down for you. What's up, friends? I'm U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos. So for this episode, I thought it'd be great to break down how different branches of the military test their individuals with a physical fitness test. So for this video, I'll break down how the Army, Marines, Air Force, and Navy conduct their physical fitness test. And I know you might be thinking, wait a minute, what about the Coast Guard? Well, I was going to do the Coast Guard, but theirs is actually pretty elaborate. They test differently based on their roles in the Coast Guard. So if you're someone who does water rescue, you have a different physical fitness test. If you're someone who is a police officer in the Coast Guard, you have a different physical fitness test. And then other people have different physical fitness tests as well. So trying to add those into the equation makes it really complicated. So I'm sorry, but I'm having to leave out the Coast Guard for this example. I'll probably also leave some links down in the description if you do want to know about the Coast Guard's physical fitness test. But when I was doing my research, it was actually very difficult to find information on them. You could easily find what it takes in their basic training. But as far as what their regular standard is once you're actually in the Coast Guard, that was a little bit difficult. So check the links in the description, and if you're really interested in the Coast Guard, maybe I have something down in there for you. But let's get into those 4 branches that I will talk about in this video. Now, the Marines also have a CFT, which stands for Combat Fitness Test, and that's a different test that uses ammo cans and some sprints and everything, but I'm not going to evaluate that in this video. That's a separate test that they additionally do. In this one, I'm just going to kind of evaluate and kind of compare the ones that are very similar to each other in the different branches of the military. Also, some things to note is that the Army and the Air Force are looking to make some changes to their physical fitness test. So I won't be covering those changes. I'm just going to go with what the current physical fitness standards are for the different branches of the military as of making this video. As well as I'm going to be covering the primary exercises that are used to evaluate the individuals. Different branches have different alternate events, like a walk, a swim, and those events will not be covered in this. And one last thing to note before we actually dive into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing, and that is to give you a good comparison, I'm just going to go off the bare minimum standards in order to pass the physical fitness test in the different branches of the military. That is not the advised way of doing it. Normally with the military, you want to try to do your best. You want to go above and beyond just the bare minimum. So you're looking to try to do the max amount of points you possibly can, but it'd be difficult to try to give you the minimum and maximum. It would just take too long. So for just evaluation purposes, to compare the different branches and how their physical fitness tests work in this video, I'm going off the bare minimum standards in order to just pass that event. But note, that is not what you should be aiming for. You should be aiming for above that. So let's start getting into it. Each branch actually tests upper body strength, abdominal strength, and endurance. An individual must pass each event in order to pass the physical fitness test. If they simply fail any one of those events, they fail the whole physical fitness test. So the standards of the individual are based on the sex of the individual as well as their age. So I'll give both the male and female, and I will also be using the very smallest, the lowest age group that is possible in each branch. So let's start off with how the different branches test upper body strength. So the Army, Navy, and Marines actually have the same standards, the minimum standards, in order to pass the push-up event, where the Air Force has a little bit different standards. Now the Marines actually also have a pull-up event, and I'll get to that here in a minute. So an individual in the Army, Navy, and Marines will have 2 minutes to complete as many push-ups as possible. So in the Army, Navy, and Marines, a male must at least do 42 push-ups in order to pass, and a female must do 19 push-ups in order to pass. Now the age brackets for that minimum standard is different for each branch. For the Army, that's going to be from 17 to 21. The Navy, that is going to be 17 to 19 years of age. And for the Marines, it'll be 17 to 20 years of age. Now, the Marines also have a pull-up event. That is actually the primary event that Marines are encouraged to do. As if they do the push-up event, they cannot max their score. They can only max their score if they do the pull-up event. But they are given the option to either decide if they want to do push-ups or if they want to do pull-ups. So for example, an individual in the Marines, if they do the pull-up event, they could max out at 100 points. Where if they max out in the push-ups, they can only earn 70 points. So they have the option to do either one. So let me tell you the minimum standards to pass if they elect to do the pull-up event. So there is no time. You simply do as many pull-ups as you possibly can, but in order for a male to pass, he must at least do 4 pull-ups, and a female must at least do 1 pull-up. Now the Air Force's push-up event is a little bit different, as they only have 1 minute to do as many push-ups as they possibly can. So for men under the age of 30, they must at least do 33 push-ups to pass, and women under the age of 30 must at least do 18 push-ups to pass. So that's the upper body test for the different branches. Now let's move on to the abdominal test. So for this event, the Army does sit-ups, and the Marines, Navy, and Air Force do crunches. However, the Navy calls them curl-ups, and the Air Force actually still calls them sit-ups, but they're essentially crunches, I guess. So before we jump into the repetitions, let me explain to you how each individual branch does that exercise. Now for the Army, this event is conducted with your hands interlocked behind your head, your knees bent, and to come up, your elbows need to go past your knees. For the Air Force, Navy, and Marines, they have their hands across their chest with their knees bent, and they will come up to have their elbows touch their thighs. So that is how the different events are conducted. Now let's jump into the minimum standards to pass that event. Now for this sit-up event, they will have 2 minutes if you are in the Army, Navy, or Marines, and 1 minute if you are in the Air Force. So for the Army age group of 17 to 21, both men and women must do at least 53 sit-ups in order to pass. In the Navy's age group of 17 to 19, both men and women must do 50 to pass. Now for the Marines, for men between the age group of 17 to 20, they will have to do at least 70 crunches in order to pass. And women in the Marines between the age group of 17 to 20 will have to do 50 in order to pass. Now in the Air Force, they have 1 minute to do their sit-ups, or crunches, however you want to kind of categorize them. But for men under the age of 30, they will have to do 42 to pass. And women under the age of 30 will have to do 38 in order to pass. Now the last event that they are tested on is a run. In the Marines, they are tested on a 3-mile run. In the Army, they're tested on a 2-mile run. And in the Air Force and the Navy, they're tested on a 1.5-mile run. Now, also note that in the Navy and in the Marines, they actually have different runtime standards based on the elevation at which the individuals are taking the test. So if they are at a lower elevation, they have one set standard, and then if they are at a higher elevation, they have a different set standard that's a little bit more lenient on the time for the run. So for this explanation, I'll be using the time for their lower elevation time standards. So for the Marines 3-mile run for the age group of 17 to 20, the men must complete it in 27 minutes and 40 seconds or less, and the women must complete it in 30 minutes and 50 seconds or less. For the Army 2-mile run for the age group of 17 to 21, the men will have to do the run in 15 minutes and 54 seconds or less in order to pass, and the women will have to do it in 18 minutes and 54 seconds or less in order to pass. For the Navy's 1.5 mile with age group 17 to 19, the men must complete it in 12 minutes and 45 seconds or less, and the women must complete it in 15 minutes or less. For the Air Force, they have a slightly slower runtime standard for their 1.5 mile run. So for the men under the age of 30, they will have 13 minutes and 36 seconds or less in order to pass, and women under the age of 30 will have 16 minutes and 22 seconds or less in order to pass. So those are the different physical fitness tests for at least the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines. Sorry I couldn't do Coast Guard, it's just too complicated. But I'm gonna leave a poll up here, one of these sides, that'll allow you to vote. I wanna know, which physical fitness test do you feel is more difficult? I'm a little bit kind of torn. I feel like the Air Force kind of has a pretty difficult push-up event. They only have 1 minute to do pretty much almost as many push-ups as the other branches have to do in 2 minutes. I do feel like the Army has a harder sit-up event, even though it's probably worse for your neck pulling on it like that, but I feel like that's more difficult to do compared to doing crunches. But when it comes to the run, it is a little bit of a toss-up between the Marines and the Army, where the Marines have to do 3 miles and the Army only has to do 2. The run time is kind of a big difference for having to do 1 more extra mile in the Marines compared to the Army having to do 2. I think I broke it down, and I think in the Army you had to at least do an 8-minute mile, where in the Marines you could get away with doing a 9-minute mile to be able to pass that 3 miles. Not much of a difference, so it's kind of almost even, I feel like. So it's kind of a close toss-up, I think, between the Army and the Marines PT test. But you let me know. Fill out the little poll up above in the little card and let me know which one you think is more difficult. At least based on the minimum standards, of course. But again, don't get all twisted and think that minimum standards is okay. It's not okay. You should push yourself to try to do the max. So in addition to doing the poll up above, also leave me some comments down below. Tell me which branch you feel is maybe more difficult and why, and maybe if you want to break it down like I did as far as how you feel about the different events for different branches and why one is harder than the other, then feel free to let me know down below. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed that breakdown of the different physical fitness tests. If so, then make sure to show me some love and hit that thumbs up. If you want to see some more of my Army related videos, I got these guys right over there you should check out. If you're not yet subscribed to my channel and you want to see more of this content pop up in your feed if YouTube allows you to, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button and also hit that bell. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Christopher Chaos, and I will see you next time. See ya.